Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. It's the France 24 debate. We're looking at the French president's first trip to North Africa since he was elected, Emmanuel Macron, dining with the King of Morocco. With us to talk about it from the Moroccan capital, Rachid Toutou, who teaches sociology and economics at Rabat University. Also with us from Casablanca, Khalid Badou, president of the Moroccan Association for Marketing and Communications. And here in the studio, we're with Jeff Porter, the founder of North Africa Risk Consulting. Welcome. Thanks for being with us here in Paris.
My pleasure.
Since mid-April, we were talking about Morocco's place on the world stage in part one of our discussion, and its clout has grown, is the consensus. However, since mid-April, unrest domestically has been growing, particularly in the Rif region, in what started as a tragic tale that mirrors the one that started the Arab Spring revolts in Tunisia. In this case, a fishmonger crushed to death while trying to salvage his confiscated catch from the scrap heap. The protests have spiraled since the arrest last month of leading activists, the most prominent, Nasser Zevsadi, charged with threatening national security. Last Sunday, tens of thousands turned out in the capital, Rabat, for a march of support that drew much more than Rif region residents.
We want a real democracy. We want active participation from citizens. A parliament that really represents Moroccans. We want to participate in the decisions because today it's not the case.
What we are asking for is the end of the despotic state, the end of the mafia state.
We want freedom for political prisoners from Al-Hasima. We're here for dignity, equality, social justice. All the Moroccan people, all political parties, all unions, all associations, all militants are here. We are all here to say no to HOWARD.
Rachid Toutou, what does HOWARD mean?
HOWARD is a term that expresses anger, and it expresses the idea that Moroccans are no longer accepting any authoritarian measures by the state and are refusing any despotic actions by the government or the state. So this term is very loaded with a lot of social, cultural, dissident meanings, which gave way to a big social movement now in North Africa, in the Rif region, but it is expanding to all the rest of Morocco. On June the 11th, I was also marching with the protester in Rabat, Mohammed V Avenue, near the parliament, and believe me, it was like roads were blocked and thousands of people were expressing solidarity with the protesters in the Rif, who are calling for dignity, for social justice, and for benefiting from human and wealth resources that are in Morocco. And as you know, historically, the Rif region has been always a dissident region from the 20s, when the nationalist leader Abdelkrim Khattabi founded his Republic Rif, passing to the 50s and 60s, rebellious against the late Hassan II, and moving towards 84 until 2003 with the reconciliation with the new king. But then, in post-Arab Spring, what the government did not notice is that margins of poverty are growing in Morocco. So these micro-regional city protests are not new. They started in 2000 and 2005 in small cities like Safro, in port cities in south of Morocco, in Igdimizid in Western Sahara, and now it's taken a national and even international dimension. So Hugra is the political slogan. It is the version of the Arab Spring, but this time this is a renewal of the political and cultural and linguistic demands of the protesters, which were blocked by cosmetic reforms right after the reform of 2011. So people,
yeah, you call them. Let's just bring that. Rashid Tutu. Let's just break that down. You call them cosmetic reforms. There was a constitutional, big constitutional reform in 2011. You're saying it was just cosmetic?
Yes, I say it is cosmetic because it was not implemented. You know, Moroccans voted on the constitution for lessening the executive powers of the king and giving more powers to an elected government and the two chambers of the parliament. But we've seen, and a lot of international observers and constitutionalists argue that right after the adoption of the new constitution until the last legislative elections of 2016, we've witnessed a return of authoritarianism, we've witnessed a return of a strong executive monarchy, marginalizing an elected government in a period of upheavals in the MENA region. So instead of implementing the democratic, what we call in Morocco, the democratic interpretation of the reforms, we have moved to more visibility to the monarchy, to more power to the monarchy, but refusing to share his power with the elected government.
Refusing to share his power. Khalid Badou, let me bring you in for your reaction. First of all, two things that we heard there from Rashid Tutu. First of all, you were talking in part one about how Morocco's clout economically has grown. It sounds from what Rashid is saying that there's also growing inequality. And secondly, how the reforms put in 2011 have not really reduced the power of the executive branch.
Well, I can hear the arguments that have been mentioned, and indeed we feel that there is a political instability at a certain time, but this is not issued mainly because of the social unrest or social movements, because Morocco got used to social movements and got used to people going in the streets to show their anger whenever there is a problem. The main issue that we have today is the problem of confidence. Moroccans have lost confidence in most of the institutions, namely the political parties, the civil society, and they only have as an issue is the king. So everybody today is addressing the king to intervene to solve the problem that's happening in the reef, and that's getting also going into other regions. So today, the March of Rabat went, and we talk about 15,000 to 50,000 people who went in the streets. We talk also about a heavy attendance of the Al-Adl wal-Ihsan, which is a strong religious movement within the Moroccan society. We talk also about people who were unhappy with all the political process that followed the October 7th elections, the October 7th, 2016. So a lot of anger, a lot of lack of confidence, and indeed there are many problems that came after the Constitution of 2011, because the Constitution itself is a high standard of dispatching the responsibilities between the king, the government, the parliament, and the people. Now we feel after 2016 and the experience that Morocco had with the PJD, which is the Justice and Development Party that was ruling and who is still ruling the government today, the experience was not very much satisfactory. There was a lack of achievements in terms of objectives that this government has set up at the beginning and for which he was elected, in terms of enforcing the law, in terms of defeating corruption, etc. So Moroccans today are screaming their anger, and they want to see change happening more or faster than it was expected. Of course, what happened in the Reef reinforced what happened. The incident you've mentioned about Mohsin Fikri sometimes in late October 2016 came as, let's say, as a déclic, as we say in French, as a startup of all these social unrest, and that continues until today. So today, I think there are political decisions that need to be taken. There are economic and social very urgent decisions that need to be taken. And I'm sure that in the coming days, hopefully, I hope that we will see some urgent decisions, and that there is a shock. This shock that's happening today, that's shaking the Moroccan society, will lead to a shock therapy that will lead to solutions.
All right, the need for quick decisions, for more. Let's cross now to Washington, and the Moroccan blogger and activist Zineb Belmkadem. Welcome to the show. Zineb,
thank you for having me, François.
We know the Prime Minister is due to visit the Northern Reef region this week. What should the government of Morocco be doing, and what should the French president be saying? Should he just stay out of this?
So it looks like the French president is visiting the king. I'm not sure if he's visiting Morocco.
Correct. It is a private visit.
Right. So I'm hoping, but not really truly believing this will happen, that President Macron will bring up the human rights violations currently occurring in Morocco and the violent unrest that is unfolding in Hoceima and in the Reef in the north of Morocco, the entire region, and that is boiling over to the capital, to Rabat, where the estimates are actually over 100,000 people came out to protest last Sunday. So it's hard for me to reflect on all of this, because to me it's all symptomatic of a much bigger issue, and the issue here is the PJD will never be able to to perform at a certain political level if they're not given a certain level of decision-making discretion, and the same for all other political parties. So we can play this back and forth game of throwing the ball and saying, well, politicians are just not doing what they're supposed to do, but politicians without teeth can't do anything. So the issue is much bigger than this, in my opinion, and the issue has been raised by the February 20th movement back in 2011, and protests were stifled, and things are the trigger that happened in the Reef is just another symptom of a much, much deeper social inequality issues, socioeconomic issues, and lack of democracy, honestly, that we've been battling for decades now.
Jeff Porter, when you think back to 2011, and there were protests, as was mentioned by Zineb just there, but Morocco also had these reforms that were put in at the time. How did you think it would go, and has it played out the way you thought it would?
Yeah, it largely has, in the sense that I think Morocco has a very sophisticated internal security services. The February 20th movement had difficulty really gaining traction, in part because it was infiltrated by security services, which diluted its cause, and in addition because I think the February 20th movement stopped short of the fundamental criticism of Morocco, and they called for changes in the political system, but not a change to the political system. And so that effectively kept it on a very short leash. In addition, the Moroccan government is very sophisticated in how it presents acquiescence to the local population, and it bought itself some time with the constitutional reforms that we discussed earlier. And I just do want to say one quick thing here, which is the Arab Spring was now 6 years ago. And we tend to see things still through the lens of the Arab Spring. But it's really important to remember that we had protests throughout North Africa in the decades prior to the Arab Spring that didn't result in political change and were simply repressed. And I think we have to start putting on a different analytical lens to view what's taking place now in Morocco. This is not the beginning of an Arab Spring. This could be a return to the era of Hassan II. It's entirely possible that Mohammed VI will become more like his father, and during Hassan
more authoritarian.
It's entirely possible. He has recourse to do that. He has the legal authority to do that. So there is that tendency, and I think we shouldn't overstate the ability of these protests to bring about political change.
Of course, the difference between today and the time of Hassan II is that today you have social media. It's much easier to get your message out if you are protesting.
The counter-argument to that is you also have fake news. And we've seen the ability of states to manipulate the social media environment in order to change popular opinion or to use social media to infiltrate groups that are opposed to the political structure.
Zineb Bemkaren, what should the king do and what is the trend right now in Morocco?
So it's unfortunately a very sad time when we have over almost 200 political detainees of conscience from the unfolding protests of the Hirak movement in the Rif, many of whom are reporters. And so the repression has escalated to levels that were not seen before. And I think, and even the Ministry of Interior has tagged these events as dangerous. So dangerous in the sense that, you know, they are symptoms of things that have not been, of demands that have not been addressed, that were consistent with 2011. I disagree with my colleague on you know, pertaining to the fact that this is a different era. There were 5 corpses found in a bank on February 20th, 2011 in Hoceima. Hoceima is where, you know, the big Hirak is happening right now. All the protests are happening there. So I think there are many, many links to people's demands in the past that have not been met by the regime. I think that the region has not been considered as you know, worthy of development projects, and so, you know, the entire region feels neglected. And you know, I'm not sure if it's a return to the Hassan II era, but it certainly is reminiscent of it in the sense that, you know, the repression is rising, the violence from riot police is rising, and the arrests are at a staggering levels right now.
Khalid Badou, let me ask you, does the current government have the means to, well, understand what's going on and apply a method that's different from that of simply cracking down?
You need to know first that the government has been appointed 2 months ago. That was on March 15th that the new government was appointed. So they didn't have time, if we can say, even if many of the ministers in the continuity and continue to manage their own portfolios, but they didn't have time to, you know, to get into the work, knowing that we had 6 months in which the government, in which Morocco was almost without government. There was only a transitory government that was ruling the country. So what's happening today, of course, we can link it to what happened in 2011. We can link it also to what happened in last October. But again, I mean, the political issue is much more profound than the economic and social interest, because if we manage to fix the political issue that we have today, which is the representation of the population by the political parties and by the civil society, maybe we can fix more than half of the problem. The current government is not yet start to implement its strategy. Just no later than yesterday, the president of the region of the north, which covers Al-Hussein from Al-Husseima to Tangier, was putting all the responsibility on the former government, saying that they were responsible for what happened. And we can understand, because the plans for development of Al-Husseima region were signed in 2015 in front of the king, and until 2016, December 2016, there was no money that has been put in the region of Al-Husseima to you know, to kick off all those development projects. So we can understand that people get angry, that people go to the street, but most importantly, because there are no mediation parties that can play the role between the population and the government. Today, the population is in Al-Husseima mainly is feeling alone. They don't feel being well represented, and this is why they go in the streets every day. Of course, we can talk about all what's happening as you know, security management and the big problems that the security management of what's happening in Al-Husseima and the lack of wiseness and the lack of responsibility from some of the people who are managing this situation. But again, I think the problem is much more deeper than the social or economic unrest. It's much more profound. It's much more of a political problem.
How do you fix it, Jeff Porter? How do you fix? How do you make it so that these impoverished regions don't feel like they're forgotten?
It's a difficult problem. You know, and I just want to clarify that I don't think that the king doesn't care, or I don't think that the Moroccan government doesn't care about trying to address these problems. But you have, as Khaled pointed out, there are problems associated with implementation of plans. There may be plans that are drafted in Rabat, and there have been plans that are drafted in Rabat for all of Morocco's impoverished regions. It's not just the Rif. It's also Tinrir. It's also the Sousse. And there are difficulties in transitioning those plans from Rabat into the regions where the revenue and economic development is needed. And that has to do with local capacity, it has to do with educational levels, it also has to do with corruption and leakage, where funds that are destined for a particular project may end up going into a developer's house, or it may end up going into an offshore account. So there are problems of application and implementation of plans that are genuinely designed to help these people. And these are difficult and challenging problems in a country with limited resources.
All right, Jeff Porter, I want to thank you. I want to thank Zineb Belkalem for being with us from Washington, Khalid Badou in Casablanca, Rashid Tutu in Rabat. Stay with us. Media Watch is next. We say hello to James Creedon. Very interesting discussion because it really was two parts. And on the world stage, Morocco's star power rising. And then when we talked about domestic politics, different story.
That's right. The first image is appearing, in any case, on social media of Emmanuel Macron arriving in Morocco. And he has been reminded with open letters in the media and tweets and whatnot of some of the issues that Moroccans really feel are very important. This is a letter signed by many members of Moroccan civil society saying, two issues we want to draw your attention to, Mr. Macron. First of all, the terrible situation of Syrian refugees.
Yeah, we didn't mention that. You're right to mention that.
So this is one of the two issues that
Syrian refugees that are caught at the border between Morocco and Algeria.
And Algeria, exactly. And in deplorable situations, they're not being allowed in. They're not being given in any way aid or asylum. The second issue is, of course, the issue in the north of Morocco in Rif. And this letter goes on to say that since the 26th of May, a wave of repression accompanied by arrests has washed over the town of Al Hoceima, and this is being echoed across the country. Peaceful demonstrations are being broken up or even violently repressed, and they go on to outline that. And they say France really has, as the country of the Declaration of Human Rights, cannot remain a spectator in this regard. Now, in no particular order, I'll just show you some other articles online about this, Francois. This is the Huffington Post Maghreb or North Africa edition. They have 10 major issues that Macron needs to look at in Morocco. Now, apart from the more obvious ones, such as bilateral economic issues, fighting terrorism, you have number one, don't get on Algeria's nerves. That was actually number one on the list. Now, in previous presidencies, I think the first visit to this to North Africa was always to Algeria. There's a lot of rivalry, whether it be in sports, politics, whatever, between these two countries. And if you look actually at this cartoon by Dilem, probably the most famous cartoonist in Algeria, you can see that he is referring to that. You have Abdelaziz Bouteflika there, the quite, I suppose, he has health issues. That's him featured on the left in a wheelchair. And you see Macron walking on water because, of course, he is flying very, very high these days, and there he is on his way to Morocco, which isn't surprising.
And the Algerian president saying, yes, he's walking on water, but in the wrong direction.
In the wrong direction, in other words, he should come here. Worth pointing out that Macron did visit Algeria and Tunisia on his election campaign, and he is set to visit Algeria in the next couple of weeks. Now, the other major issue that is pointed out in this article, if they talk about 10 issues to bear in mind, one is, well, the freedom of the press. And indeed, our own channel has been prevented from filming those protests associated with Rif, these peaceful, well, they're not so peaceful anymore, but they were peaceful social protests, and France 24 on Monday was told it can't film in the country. So obviously, I imagine that will be a point of discussion between Emmanuel Macron and the King as well. Interesting to point out that the major French-speaking daily in Morocco, Le Matin, which is obviously talking about the visit, you see nothing, no mention anywhere on that website, as far as I can see, at least not prominently, of that ongoing social unrest. Just a quick look at social media, which is, of course, covering that to some extent. There might be some degree of censorship, but you do have photos of those protests in Rabat. That was the most recent big one, and lists of names. Some 88 people who've been imprisoned because of those protests. And the Huffington Post Maghreb edition does have some articles saying that really it is time now for a corrupt political establishment in Morocco to get to terms with this issue and to really listen to the people.
James Creedon, I want to thank you. I want to thank our panel once again. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate.
Thanks very much.